As the focus of nearly every D&D joke, bards have a pretty thick skin. But what if we made them even thicker? No, like a tank, a tanky bard. Let's make a bard that is also a tank. I'll be the first to admit that I had my doubts about something like this working practically, but I owe it to one of my own players for showing me just how strong this multi-class build can be. You can even check it out in action during our ongoing livestream campaign, Legacy of the Ashen. Brett plays this character so well and does a great job of motivating a lot of these build decisions with story elements within the campaign. So I'll detail a bit of that as we go along too, in case you want to do something similar. And after seeing what this thing can do, you will want to. First, let's take a look at our ability scores for this build. It should come as no surprise that we'll want a high charisma score, but we'll also want good constitution and dexterity, as well as a little extra strength. We'll be forced to dump our wisdom and intelligence scores as a result of this, but it will be worth it. Now, we did roll for stats in our campaign, but I'll be using point buy for this video to keep things a little more balanced. So we'll put a 15 into charisma, a 14 into both constitution and dexterity, a 12 into strength, and an 8 into both intelligence and wisdom. These two scores will be our Achilles heel, but we may have an answer for that later. Don't worry. Then there are a number of race options that we can choose for this build, but we're going to use the Protector ASMR with a custom origin for a few key reasons. We'll get some great resistances to both necrotic and radiant damage, 60 feet of dark vision, some extra hit points equal to our level with the Healing Hands ability as an action, and Radiant Soul, which comes online at 3rd level. This grants us both a flying speed and extra radiant damage equal to our level once on each turn when we deal damage with a spell or attack. While this is an action to activate, only lasts for 1 minute and can only be used once per long rest, it offers some great utility outside of combat and can really increase our damage output if we manage to trigger it before combat begins. Finally, we'll keep the +2 to our charisma score that we would get normally, but we're going to drop our extra racial increase into strength to get us to 17 and 13 respectively. Then we're ready to take our first level in Warlock. As this ASMR begins his journey, he seeks to make a name for himself by following in his famous mother's footsteps as a warrior and hero of Turasil. Though his mother is long gone, her spirit still lingers as a guiding light and she becomes his Hexblade patron. So, traveling under the stage name of Odd Beatweaver, he continues to sing songs of heroism as he wields his mother's shield in her honor. Naturally, we'll take the celebrity adventurer Scion background here, and that'll mostly net us proficiency in perception and performance as well as a disguise kit. And beginning in Warlock covers us on some of our pain points with proficiency in charisma and wisdom saving throws, and we'll still be able to take additional skill proficiencies in deception and intimidation to suit our warrior bard nature. Most importantly, choosing Hexblade as our otherworldly patron gives us proficiency in medium armor, shields, and martial weapons, most of which we will be using immediately to crank our AC up to 19 with some half-plate armor, our mother's shield, and our dexterity bonus. Further, we'll be able to use our charisma modifier for our attack and damage rolls rather than our lower strength and dexterity while using a special pact weapon that we can designate at any time we finish a long rest, so long as the weapon is one that we have proficiency with and doesn't have the two-handed property. Level 1 in Hexblade Warlock also gives us Hexblade's Curse, which allows us to mark a creature within 30 feet as a bonus action for 1 minute and grants us our proficiency bonus and extra damage against that creature, the ability to crit on both 20s and 19s, and our Warlock level plus our charisma modifier and extra healing when that target dies. We can only use this once per short rest, but even just the extra damage and healing will come in handy as a frontline combatant, let alone the extra crit chances. And all of this gets stacked up on top of Pact Magic at just first level when we get 2 Warlock cantrips and 2 first level Warlock spells to use with our 1 first level Warlock spell slot. As for what you should pick here, I definitely recommend Eldritch Blast as a solid range damaging cantrip, even though we're unlikely to get any Eldritch invocations with this build, Mage Hand for some utility, Armor of Agathis for some extra damage and staying power all in the same spell, and the shield spell, even though this would be a poor choice for a lot of other Warlock builds. The reason shield usually isn't a great option is because Warlock spell slots all scale together and shield doesn't give us anything for upcasting it. So normally by level 3, you'd have to use a second level spell slot to cast a first level spell. However, in this case, shield becomes a great last ditch effort against any big attacks that beat out our 19 AC, giving us a whopping 24 for the rest of the round when we need it. And better yet, our spell slot even comes back on a short rest, so we may be able to use this trick in most combats in order to offset our smaller D8 hit die. Do just keep in mind that shield is a spell that requires both verbal and somatic components. That's saying a thing and making a hand gesture with a free hand. So some DMs rightly won't let you get away with casting it as a reaction if you have both your hands full. Be sure to talk to them about this and feel free to take a different spell like Cause Fear or Charm Person if they don't let it slide. On that note, you should also know that Eldritch Blast has a somatic component, although you can easily stow your weapon as a free action to cast the cantrip and then draw your weapon again on the following turn before you rush into melee range. Regardless, all of this at just level 1 does a great job of showcasing why the Hexblade Warlock is so key to making this build work. But alas, all good things must come to an end eventually. As Odd Beatweaver continues to hone his abilities working as a mercenary, he often takes his combat style to the extreme with a performative flair in an effort to gain notoriety. So at second level, he takes his first level in Bard. In addition to gaining proficiency in Persuasion, Odd also starts to carry a war drum on his hip as a way to intimidate enemies and weave his own story by magical means. But mechanically, this does pose some interesting problems. At this stage in our build, Odd may sometimes need to switch between his weapon and his drum's spellcasting focus, which is a problem we'll address later. For now, we'll want to make sure that we aren't running into any more of the same spell component issues that we just finished addressing with our Warlock spells. Luckily, this won't be much of an issue for now, since many of the spells we want are only verbal anyway. After you pick out a couple of cantrips, you'll get 4 first level spells that you can use with 2 new first level Bard spell slots, in addition to your 1 Warlock spell slot from earlier. If you're curious about how this all works together, be sure to check out my multiclassing guide that covers all of this in detail, and then consider picking up spells like Dissonant Whispers for some forced movement that can incur an opportunity attack from us, Fairy Fire to give us even more chances to hit or crit enemies, Healing Word since it's one of the best healing spells in the game, and Silvery Barb since it is the best spell in the game. All of these options have only verbal components and will offer a huge boost to your already potent Hexblade abilities. Just make sure your DM is okay with Silvery Barb since it is banned from some tables. Yes, it is that good. Odd even learns to empower his comrades with his compelling words and music in the form of bardic inspiration at this stage. So we're doing a bit of everything here. Tanking, healing, damage dealing, social interaction, utility, and supporting our allies with our bonus action to give them a D6 that they can use on an ability check, attack roll, or saving throw in the next 10 minutes. And we'll gain even more utility with our second level in Bard as Odd becomes a jack of all trades and can add half his proficiency bonus rounded down to any ability check he isn't already proficient in. From there, our Song of Rest can heal our allies by 1d6 over a short rest while we regain our Warlock spell slot, and then we move on to level 4 and our third level in Bard. A very important one at that. First of all, we'll get one of my favorite features in Expertise, choosing from Persuasion and Performance as our double proficiencies. But more importantly, we'll get to choose our Bard College subclass, and we're picking the Path of the Swords Bard. This choice nets us some armor and weapon proficiencies that we already had, and the ability to use weapons we're proficient with as a spellcasting focus for our Bard spells. This is great news, although it still doesn't technically solve our issues with casting spells like Shield and Eldritch Blast that we got from Warlock. Your DM may be cool with it anyway, but regardless, we won't have to worry about being so choosy on your Bard spells at least, and that'll open us up to some fantastic options a little later. For now, we'll pick up the Dueling Fighting style for an extra 2 damage to our one-handed melee weapon attacks, and unlock the Blade Flourish feature. This ability allows us to expend a use of our Bardic Inspiration for different kinds of special effects when we land an attack on a creature, while also automatically increasing our walking speed by 10 feet until the end of the turn. Defensive Flourish deals extra damage equal to a roll of your inspiration die and increases your AC by the same amount until the start of your next turn. Slashing Flourish deals an inspiration die and extra damage to your target and another creature within 5 feet of you. And Mobile Flourish deals extra damage while pushing away your target 5 feet plus the number rolled and allowing you to close on them immediately. Your Bardic Inspiration die may only be a D6 for now, but it will be a D8 before long, and you'll come to find that the Defensive Flourish in particular can be extremely powerful with this build. It's not uncommon to end up with something well north of a 20 AC on most rounds of combat with this feature, even if you can only use it once per turn. Then, as we get to our 4th level in Bard, we'll get our first ability score improvement or feat. Since we've got a 17 in our main charisma stat, you might be tempted to increase that to an 18 here. However, I'm going to argue for something a little different. An extra +1 to attack and damage rolls would be nice, and we'd even increase our spell saves to 15 instead of 14 by boosting our charisma. But I think taking Polearm Master is the better option, and it's ultimately what Brett decided to do in our campaign as well. At this stage in our build, we are all about getting in close to our enemies and landing attacks so that we can make the best use of our flourishes for extra AC, damage, force movement, and everything else. Polearm Master gives us a bonus action attack on our turn as an extra chance to land an attack, and even gives us a nifty way to trigger opportunity attacks more reliably and get yet another attack in that can benefit from our ASMR Radiant Soul ability and Hexblade's Curse. Even one extra attack per turn is going to be worth a lot more to us than just +1 to attack and damage rolls, especially since we'll be looking for something to do with our bonus action now that Bardic Inspirations will be going towards flourishes almost exclusively. Finally, many of the spells we use don't often care much about saving throws. Healing Word just sort of happens, as does Silvery Barbs, which can even be used to give us advantage on attacks too. Sure, Fairy Fire and Dissonant Whispers are clear exceptions here, but Fairy Fire in specific is still likely to see at least 1 or 2 of our targets fail the save in a given area. And we can use Silvery Barbs to help make Dissonant Whispers stick as well. Plus, as we move on to our 5th level in Bard, we'll want to consider some other spells that fit the bill, like Mirror Image, Aid, Leomund's Tiny Hut, or maybe even Intellect Fortress if you're going up against some enemies that are targeting your weaker saving throws. None of these options care about our mediocre spellcasting modifier, and they all add a lot of survivability to the overall build. And at this level, our Bardic Inspirations come back on a short rest instead of a long rest, and the Inspiration die increases to a D8, meaning a single defensive flourish could catapult our AC all the way to a lofty 27, or a 24 on average. Then we'll take one more level in Bard for the unlikely to be used Counter Charm feature, and the real prize, an extra attack when we take the attack action. We've already established that we want as many chances as possible to hit or crit so that we can activate those blade flourishes, and this gets us 3 chances to do so on every turn. All of this makes Odd quite the capable adventurer with a number of spells and abilities that make it nearly impossible to damage him while he dishes out respectable damage himself and supports his allies with healing, protection, and empowering effects. But in his travels, Odd is confronted by secrets from his mother's past, and he is compelled by her spirit to take up her old sword in order to redeem the blade as a true hero. He begins to realize that becoming a hero requires more than just fantastic fighting abilities. It requires a resolve to fight for what is right, regardless of the fame and fortune. And so, still following in his mother's footsteps, he takes his first level in Paladin. A few of you may have noticed a couple of issues here that I'll do my best to explain now. Firstly, Odd is taking up his mother's sword, which notably doesn't work with Polearm Master. We ruled in our game that he could continue using Polearm Master on the laurels of flavor alone, but you can always continue to use a polearm if your DM is unwilling to do the same. Also, Odd actually didn't take a level in Paladin just yet in our live streamed game since he didn't have a high enough strength score yet. You're getting a bit of a preview now since he is intending to do so later with some homebrew tinkering on the back end. That said, level 8 does seem to be the most optimal point to make this dip into Paladin based on when other Bard features come online. Although this level is going to officially have us using multi-class spellcaster rules for spell slots, so feel free to refer to my guide on that again as we go along. Finally, the characters in our campaign are currently only level 8, So moving forward, we'll finish out this build by following Brett's intent for his character, but do know that it may not end up matching exactly with what he does as the adventure continues. And for anyone concerned, I'll make sure to keep the rest of this spoiler free in case any of you watch our live streams. Now, this level in Paladin will give us our first D10 hit die, some proficiencies we already have, Divine Sense for detecting celestials, fiends, and undead within 60 feet as an action, and Lay on Hands in order to heal ourselves and our allies as an action. But what we really want is what we'll get with our second level into Paladin, Divine Smites. This ability will give us another use for our spell slots that doesn't rely on spell modifiers. Instead, we can simply burn a spell slot anytime we hit a creature with a melee weapon attack to deal as much as 5d8 extra radiant damage, or 68 if the target is an undead or fiend. This combines extremely well with our ability to dish out extra damage via our blade flourishes and our ability to crit on 19s and 20s with our Hexblade's Curse. And if a crit were to occur, it could lead to something like 80 points of damage on average with a single attack. Oh, and in case you weren't aware, we can smite as many times as we want per turn, so we can really turn up the heat here. Not to mention that our second level in Paladin will also get us the defensive fighting style for yet another +1 to our AC and a couple of new Paladin spells. Luckily, Paladin is yet another charisma-based caster, so we won't have to worry about what stats to use depending on which spells we cast. But these spells won't benefit from our weapon spellcasting focus like our bard spells do, so you want to be careful about what you pick here, even though you can swap your Paladin spells after each long rest. Options like Command, Compel Duel, Detect Magic, and even Ceremony can be some decent spells to look at, but truthfully, most of our low-level spells will get used on Silvery Barbs, Healing Word, and Aid anyway, and you'll want to save those high-level spell slots for smiting. So, with his resolve steeled in Radiant Light and his path set by the spirit of his mother, Odd continues to hone his performative fighting style for others and not just for fame and fortune. At level 10, we return to Bard, and at level 11, we'll get another ability score improvement or feat. This time, we will increase our charisma score by taking the skill Expert feat. Here, we'll grab a flavorful proficiency in history to represent our focus on following our motherly patron, and an expertise in perception in order to represent Odd's focus on seeking and rooting out the forces of evil wherever they take hold. Of course, this will mechanically help us in situations where we could be surprised by enemies as well, though the main benefit is that our charisma is finally going to increase to 18 in order to bump up our spell modifier and our attack and damage rolls. A couple more levels in Bard will net us 2 more expertise skills in both Intimidation and History, a larger D10 Bardic Inspiration die, and we'll also unlock our first round of Magical Secrets. It is at this stage that Odd's heroic pursuit truly blossoms as he becomes able to summon the spirits of other heroes to fight at his side and invoke his divine favor in order to disrupt the magic of others. Here we take Spirit Guardians and Counterspell as Bard spells that will benefit from our weapon being our spell focus. We are just level 13 now, but our Tankard has already amassed a stunning number of tricks and abilities for supporting allies, dealing damage, supplying utility solutions, and being nearly impossible to pin down on the front lines. And after just a couple more levels, that only becomes more potent as we finally take an ability score improvement in order to max out our charisma. With that done, you may want to consider some other higher level Bard spells like Polymorph, Dimension Door, Synaptic Static, and Hero's Feast, but you'll probably still want to save a lot of your 5th level slots for smites, so do keep that in mind. Then by the time we get to level 17 for our 14th level in Bard, it's actually hard to know what else we might even need from Magical Secrets. It's worth noting that we could take the Shield spell here since it would then utilize our weapon spell focus, but you'd probably rather consider options like Crown of Stars, Divine Word, Holy Weapon, or Simulacrum. Of course, our multi-classing does mean that we'll miss out on taking the Wish spell as a possible option, but we'll have so many tools in our kit that it'll feel like we didn't. Especially since we'll also unlock a major upgrade to our blade flourishes at this level that allows us to use a d6 for a blade flourish in exchange for not using any bardic inspiration at all. And as we finish things off at level 20 with a few more levels in Bard, we'll take the tough feat at 19th level for an easy extra 40 hit points in total. With so many multi-class builds and level 20 theory crafts, it can take a long time for an idea to fully come online, but the Tankard does as advertised right out of the gate and gets consistently better as we go along. By the end, Odd Beatweaver has truly earned his place in the annals of history as a mighty hero with powers and abilities that most could only dream of. If you'd like to see how his story truly unfolds, be sure to check out our live stream campaign, Legacy of the Ashen, on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Central Time. We run an interactive game where our live chat gets to influence sessions and characters in major ways that can easily change the shape of the adventure at large. I'll see you there, but until next time, go out there and make some chaos.